Afternoon, members of council and our administrative team and also those who are participating from the comforts of your home and certainly to our delegations here this afternoon. So I'm prepared to call the meeting to order and to the members, any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda as presented to you today. None indicated, so we'll have that reflected in the minutes. The introduction of and purpose of our meeting today is to hear the public comment on the town's draft new official plan pursuant to the provisions of the Planning Act, RSO 1990. The Director of Planning and Building Services, Mr. Brian Hillman, and the Manager of Planning Services, Mr. Chad Jeffries, will present report from Planning and Building Services 2020-101. Town Tecumseh new official plan results of the public information centers. So with that, if there's something, Mr. Hillman and certainly Mr. Jeffries, if there's anything that you want to bring forward or add, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council and administration and those from the public who are attending or either watching. This is a very exciting night, I think, for the town. We have in front of us a public meeting, and it's on the draft new official plan, and it's in accordance with the Planning Act, of course. And this has been going on for some time, and there has been actually considerable consultation that has happened over the years at different junctures and times in the development of the document and or the background report. So to start with, Chad and I will be very brief. We propose to do a very high-level summary of how we got to where we are today and give opportunity for comments, questions, and so on. So with that, I'll take just a couple minutes to remind everyone what is the purpose of the official plan, of course. And that is it's a significant planning policy document that is required under the Planning Act. And it is something that we have to be very careful in developing with respect to provincial policy, the county official plan, and a number of planning principles that we have regard to. And as you know, we have been involved with developing a number of discussion papers that were very subject oriented. And we try to identify sort of trends that are taking place either in the town or in the background, just societal trends and so on. So the official plan is a 25-year planning document, and it proposes to set out a policy environment at a very high level that is looking to enhance the quality of life in the town. It's creating a livable, complete community, having regard to the wise use of natural resources, community services, municipal infrastructure, which is a significant investment that the town makes, and looking to ensure there's a strong economy and addressing climate change mitigation and adaptation. Now, these are words that are actually in the official plan. We also are very cognizant that land use patterns have an impact on compatibility between different land uses. And that we are very much looking to ensure that good agricultural land is protected, preserved, and enhanced for long-term use. And this is a very strong, not only a local and regional issue, but very strong provincial issue. This plan also establishes a policy framework for climate change mitigation and adaptation, which is a really new venue to have those types of policies introduced in the municipality. It's encouraging a range of households, really reflective of the changing needs in our community from a demographic perspective primarily, but also different needs generally. Our housing needs are changing over time, so it's creating opportunities. Ensuring that we have a balanced transportation network. Again, looking at different needs, different age groups, different financial capacity that's available. So creating a vision that takes into account, we want to offer balance in our community for transportation. Certainly improving accessibility for persons with disabilities and the elderly in particular. And we want to make sure that future development occurs in a way that is sustainable from a sort of an ecological perspective, a financial perspective. And generally, it's a large framework around which it guides our recommendations to council, administration's consideration of issues, council's decisions, stakeholders' thoughts, and other government agencies. And they of course, have all had a significant input. So how we got here today, there were 11 discussion papers that have been developed over time. There was public consultation before those were brought to council. There was public consultation in the north and the south of the town after they were completed. That led to the drafting of a new official plan that actually, council will recall, it's almost it's almost a month to the day, February 25th, we had presented to council a very significant and detailed PowerPoint presentation that summarized what is this document going to say? What are the key trends? What are the key policy objectives? The intent coming out of that February 25th meeting a year ago was then to go into a public consultation process. And as we all know, the world took a little bit of a shift. COVID arrived, and there was literally a period of time where we were in a significant lockdown. There actually were no public meetings, if you'll recall. There were no gatherings. And there was a real long extended period where we were all going and addressing other priorities. So that process was basically put on hold. Ultimately, as the spring arrived and we got back to a little bit of normalcy, the province issued a new updated policy statement. So the provincial policy statement is a document that flows out of the Planning Act, and it creates a policy framework that is intended to provide the clear view of the province as it relates to planning, and is something that we want to be consistent with, and that council in making decisions wants to be consistent with. So when the 2020 PPS came out, as we call it, we took the time to visit it, make changes to the draft official plan. And we did that in consultation with agencies that are most directly involved with the implementation of that document. So that would be the County of Essex, who is our approval authority. As you know, council adopts an official plan. The County of Essex ultimately is the body that would oversee its approval. So we had a lot of discussions with the County of Essex. IRCA is a body that has significant input on these documents, and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, who's the lead sort of one window agency at a provincial perspective. So that time was taken to make sure that we bring into the document a fresh look, and looking at it through the lens of the PPS 2020. And ultimately, at the end of September, at a special council meeting, a draft document was brought forward to council on a public agenda. There was a special council meeting. We reviewed it at a high level. And we had council endorse for us a public consultation process that ends this, it comes to this point, but in between then and now, we've gone through a bit of a process. So very briefly, I'll hand off the baton to Chad, who's just going to summarize some of what has happened over the last couple of months, and then we'll be able to open the floor for further discussion and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hillman. Mr. Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, members of council. One of the key components of this public consultation process were public information centers that were held over 2 days in November using the Zoom platform. During those 2 days, we spoke to 6 individuals, a consultant representing an industry group, as well as the food group. And we had some very in-depth discussions that, from our perspective, went really well, were very positive and productive sessions. We also received some additional written correspondence after those PICs, which we've appended to the report that's before council tonight. And that correspondence was from some of the people we spoke to during the PICs, but also to people who weren't able to attend those, but wanted to comment on the draft document. We also made the document available over the PlaySpeak platform, which received 67 hits and 13 people registered on this platform, but we didn't receive any comments through that platform. As Brian mentioned, numerous discussions were held with the county planning department, leading to the first draft of the plan that was presented to council in October, but numerous discussions also were held with the county planning department after that, as they're the approval authority, as well as IRCA representatives, because IRCA has an interest in a number of issues within the official plan, including natural heritage, natural hazards, stormwater management, climate change, and source water protection. And we're fairly confident that both the county and IRCA are satisfied with the policies in the draft document. We also reached out to the First Nations and Métis groups and provided them with copies of the document, inviting their comments and offering to host a Zoom meeting at their convenience. As Brian noted earlier, tonight is the final step in this process in the form of a formal public meeting under the Planning Act. In the report that's before council tonight, there's a table that lists the issues that were discussed at the public information centers and that were brought forward through the correspondence received after that, and provides a brief administrative response to those issues. You will note that those issues that are bolded are revisions that we are recommending to the draft after analyzing and assessing the comments that were received. So after hearing from council and interested parties tonight, And depending on the scope and scale of the issues that are raised, we intend to address any new comments and to bring a draft official plan back to council to consider for adoption either in late February or early March. So, Mr. Mayor, that's our brief introduction. We will be available for any questions that council wants to direct to us throughout the night.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Jeffries. So I'm sure that council will reserve their questions till after we move forward. All right, we'll move on to delegations, and our first delegation is Mr. Joe Awani, President of 2178817 Ontario, Inc.
Your worship, Mr. Awani hasn't joined us yet, so if we could proceed with this, our second delegation, Ms. Eugenie.
Okay, we'll move them to number 4. Then I'll ask Ms. Josette Eugenie, one of our residents. You don't look like Josette.
That's a combination.
I got my mother because my mother still has hers.
If I
Good
may,
evening.
through you,
Good afternoon.
Mr. Mayor, may I believe, Jeff, it's your 50th today, or was that yesterday? Pardon?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
happy belated 50th.
Thank you.
Yeah, the
Cheers.
big 5-0.
Yes.
Well,
Well-
congratulations, and
Hopefully, we have many more. So that'll be good.
absolutely. Well, carry on.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to the draft OP. A lot of work done there to consolidate those official plans, and really a big thank you to administration for the time in discussing the changes with us. We had a couple of things we wanted to bring forward today. I guess the time horizon for the study is providing a 20-year settlement area, as we understand it. And there's a bit of a disconnect with what can be serviced within the 20-year horizon and what's identified as a 20-year supply of settlement area. And you'll notice that some of the feedback we received was that horse trading is not really supported. And I guess also, if you're looking at item 8, that packaged treatment plants to try to assist with servicing is also not supported. So what we would be, I guess, suggesting as part of the draft OP is to maybe move some of the lands that are outside of the servicing horizon into the current settlement area. We have some property that are in the Maidstone Hamlet that, according to the Water and Wastewater Master Plan, is outside of the 20-year servicing horizon. And we have some other lands that's just at the, I guess, north limit of the Cranbrook subdivision.
Right on the south side of Cranbrook.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So a little closer to where servicing is happening, and with the County Road 42 reconstruction that recently went to County Council with some detailed design updates and timelines, probably a little more likely within the 20-year horizon, something could be serviced at that particular location. Did you want us to discuss all of the items at once, or are we going to discuss and talk to one item completely before moving on to something else?
I'm going to ask Mr. Hillman, I mean, if you want to bring that, deal with this as they move along, or it might be easier to be able to address them as they move along.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly we can speak to that. And I think, it was raised through the PIC process, and you'll see in the report we did discuss it. So yes, the official plan is something that we have in excess of actually 25 years of land supply. So we are well in excess of land supply in relation to what are projected to be our needs. The Water Wastewater Master Plan identifies our long-term needs to build out. But it does have a period within which, and Mr. Bartnick could speak to it if need be, that it projects how that infrastructure will move out. And certainly Maidstone Hamlet is near the end of that construction period. So the comments we've provided to date was, as it relates to the issue of take some lands out of one hamlet and move them into the other, a couple of things come to mind. So we're speaking about the north end, where County Road 42 is. We have a significant amount of land there. And we know that for the infrastructure to move down to the south end, it will take a considerable amount of time, even to get to the lands that we're speaking to, which are on the south side of 42. And that really, by adding additional lands there, their serviceability is really a function of infrastructure getting to them. So they're still at probably the sort of the tail end of that 20-year horizon, I would suspect. But also Maidstone Hamlet, you'll recall, went through a very community-driven and specific process to try and identify how that hamlet would evolve over time, trying to address a number of issues. And all of the planning assumptions that have been made by the town, whether it be the development charges exercises or the master servicing plans, have made certain basic assumptions around where areas will be populated over time. The challenge is that they are going to be slightly delayed in terms of when they are developable. So our recommendation is to basically stay the course. The expansion of the settlement area that we're speaking to, which is just sort of the south side of Cranbrook, could possibly happen under another OP review 5 to 10 years from now, maybe, if the land absorption rates happen in a way that it shows the town has generated need. And that would be evaluated through not only a county OP process, but a municipal process that would evaluate our long-term needs. So, I think at the end of the day, what we have available for servicing is a significant amount of land, and all of the studies to date have really looked at trying to keep an organized perspective on how servicing moves throughout the municipality. So to start doing horse trading becomes very disruptive, I think, to all of the planning that's happened, not just land use, but our servicing and our financial planning that's taken place to date, with very limited gain for the municipality. And that's the essence of what we were trying to speak to in the summary in the report.
We believe the gain to the town would be if there's 20 years before the sewer and water gets improved at Maidstone Hamlet, it would just be shifting the north end of the Maidstone Hamlet to the south end of the Tecumseh Hamlet, where the growth would end up growing through to get to Maidstone. We were just thinking that if the land for development was going to be used up in the 20-year time horizon, you would run out of OP land that was serviced and be waiting at Maidstone to develop OP land that's been designated there.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, I understand. Yeah, I think based on our projections, that is a very unlikely scenario. The amount of land that the town has throughout the northern settlement area, Oldcastle, and Maidstone is quite significant given the growth forecasts that have been identified. And I think what would be appropriate is to really monitor the growth. And so, every 5 to 10 years, there should be a reflection on what is happening. Are the policies, capturing reality, and deal with this issue at that point. I think right now, when we looked at it, it just seems a little bit premature and it's jumping the gun. But we're aware of the opportunity that exists at some point in the future. But I think it's quite a ways out in the future when we look at what's available currently.
Thanks, Brian. So does the official plan, prohibit the horse trading? Like how would this improve in a future review of the official plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the plan does not speak to horse trading. The plan sets out where our settlement areas are, and it guides development in those areas. Horse trading is a concept that is spoken to at the county level. It's going to be under review. But what was realized when that was developed at the county, there are areas that of the region that really just are never in any time horizons for servicing. They're literally not in any master servicing plans of any type. And it was recognized that there could be an opportunity created through that policy environment. Not quite the situation we're in the town. There's actually been a lot of thought given to how will the services move out and how will we fund them and staging of it and so on. So the town plan is very much oriented to here are our settlement areas, here how things will happen. And as I said, looking at the projections that we have, the town of Tecumseh is very comfortable with the amount of land that's designated right now for quite a period of time.
Okay.
So the second item that we would like to speak to is the restoration opportunity overlay. This item, I guess we've had a little bit of discussion, and I appreciate the comments that are addressed in the report to council this evening. One aspect that is not addressed here is the reference to the restoration opportunity overlay as it relates to maintaining municipal drains. So there's some reference that suggests as part of routine maintenance, some buffers connecting natural heritage areas will be established along municipal drains. And I really don't agree with this approach. And in conversation with IRCA, it's our understanding that that's not what was intended. Brian, I see you're shaking your head. Is there maybe something you've been able to talk about internally about that?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I think even at the time we had our PIC that we acknowledged there was, well, let me back up a little bit. The policy that is in the draft was developed in consultation with provincial ministries and with IRCA. The broad hope is that the overlay helps to, over time, over the life of the plan, start to create linkages, natural heritage linkages. So that's what the overlay was aspiring to do. And it views in our area, of course, which is a fairly stark landscape from the perspective of natural heritage features, it views municipal drains as an opportunity. Now, what we came to realize, and it was through the discussion with yourselves at the PIC, was I think it's safe to say there's been a bit of overreach on the part of the policy that was drafted. And it's really what it comes down to. It comes into conflict with the intent and the purpose of the Drainage Act. And it's just going a little bit too far. The concept is sound, but it's very difficult to implement. So what we have said and tried to say in the report that we have on the agenda this evening is that we recognize that there needs to be a revision. And where we see this going in discussions with IRCA since we've chatted with yourselves is that it be written in a manner that where all the parties and under a drainage consideration are in agreement that there could be the introduction of this type of corridor, that it could be implemented, but where that isn't the case, that the opportunity basically goes away. So there is a rework of that section that's required prior to coming back to council.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's great.
I guess the third item we had sent in, I guess, by email late in the process, just recently, after reading your report. There's, I guess, natural heritage areas which qualify for passive recreation are not considered eligible for parkland dedication for a development proposal. And I guess I don't understand if they qualify as passive recreation opportunities, how that's not something that can be considered in that fashion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so that was an issue that came up through one of our other PIC discussions. And again, the issue there is what we were trying to indicate through a policy perspective is that these natural heritage areas are not intended to be, for lack of a better way to say it, like fenced off areas and they're for natural purposes only, but that they actually are areas where we should encourage the public to become engaged with and utilize in some manner. And usually that's through, the introduction of trails or that sort of thing. And that they should be incorporated where they exist into developments in a way that they are protected, enhanced, and that the public is allowed to interact with those features. What we were trying to be clear on is that a natural heritage feature in and of itself, even if they are integrated into a development through a trail or protected, do not qualify as a parkland dedication, which is deemed to be actual parkland. That is the typical form of parkland. And, in looking at this issue, we've looked across the province, and that really is the standard that's used, that when development happens, there's usually a parkland dedication of land or a contribution, cash contribution. What the policy is trying to say is that where you have natural heritage features, A, they're protected, and B, that they be designed in a way that the public is not, they're not designed in a way that they are closed and exclusive from development, but actually they're integrated into it. So that's really the recommendation that was, that's the policy format that's in the OP, and that we were trying to communicate.
That seems like, so what happens with the land if a development were to develop around a natural heritage area?
You would be subject to whatever EIS studies are required, and there may be buffering required, setbacks, and it would be maintained in that manner. We had something like this in the south end, actually.
What happens to the ownership?
Ownership
of the land?
That's an issue that has not been finally resolved. There's probably the option of an easement. We were trying to get to the point where IRCA would take over these lands, but there's not a complete appetite for that. So I would say that's an area where there's still further discussion to be had.
Because it feels like expropriation without remuneration.
Well, sometimes, yeah, the provincial policy statement sets up these lands to be protected in a way that it does feel like that, but it was not intended that they were a parkland contribution.
So what's a passive recreational facility? I don't understand how they're passive recreation, but they're not parkland.
It would be passive recreational trails. It wouldn't be any scenario where you're not removing any of the features that are integral to that.
But a trail would be a linear park. I don't understand that.
Yeah, trails typically are part of the transportation network too, right? So we don't include trails as a piece of parkland. A trail is a means by which one moves around. And, I think to be clear, this isn't something where it's intended, a developer comes forward and we're saying, introduce features into this natural heritage feature that allow people to walk around. It's saying that from a policy perspective, these are natural heritage features, they need to be protected, and that over time, they need to be accessible to the public. And that's really the only way you get them protected is for people to reconnect back to these features. So it's not a burden placed on a developer per se to go in and do things to those areas, but they are policy opportunities for the municipality. And we don't want to get caught by a policy that says you can do nothing in this natural heritage feature. And therefore, ultimately what you're saying is fence it off.
Correct, but by the same token, the developer can't develop it.
That's correct. Yeah.
I understand.
Heritage features are intended to be protected. Yes, that's correct.
So if you were a developer and you bought a farm that had a natural heritage feature, the first thing you would do is cut it down.
I would just very respectfully, through you, Mr. Mayor, say that you should have regard to the Species at Risk Act for sure. There are a lot of provincial pieces of legislation that, deal with this. That is certainly something we hear all the time. And, there's only so far that these policies can go. But again, keep in mind, these are policy objectives, right? They're setting out what is the vision and what is the view going forward.
I see the opportunity to, I guess, use them as a portion or some kind of compensation towards parkland as probably in everybody's best interest.
Is the parkland designation a hard and fast 5%, or is it up to 5%? And then the natural heritage area could be part of that negotiation at that development time.
The Planning Act just sets out what the what we're allowed as a municipality to take. So for non-res, it's 2%, residential 5%. And yeah, I would say that there's always room for some level of negotiation. That's sort of a common practice at the time of development.
But if the OP specifically states that it can't be used for that, or is the OP maybe need some softer wording to allow that kind of
I think through you, Mr. Mayor, I think what the OP is trying to do is create clarity at this point that these natural heritage lands should be accessible to people. I know I'm repeating myself, but under the Planning Act, what we're trying to acquire is either parkland, which is traditional parkland for recreational purposes, or cash in lieu so that the town can invest in parkland somewhere in that neighborhood.
I guess as a community amenity, we struggle with that.
Okay, well, we will certainly take a look at that prior to this being finalized.
Thank you.
I think that all of our concerns.
Yeah.
So thank you very
Thank
much
you for your time.
Brian, and just some examples of that would be, for example, Fairplay Woods, if there's any development there that buffer, or McAuliffe Woods as an example as well. I think, the protection in that. And I do believe the Del Duca lands actually, and there is a kind of a woodlot piece there. I think that had to be also buffered. So those are kind of examples.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe it was the Santa Rosa property has a fairly significant
Yes, Santa Rosa.
a feature on it.
Okay. All right. Any further questions or comments, Josette and Jeff?
No, I think
All good.
we're satisfied.
Okay, thank you very much for your input and your participation.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe that Mr. Awani, the president of 217-8817, is now online. And so we'll certainly go back to him. Make it. Oh. Well, maybe Sean, you can maybe figure out. Oh, there we go.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you for your time. Originally when the OP was drafted and I had a look at it and the opportunity to review it, I did have some concerns, and I did speak with the town and voice my concerns. So I wanted to be a delegate just to be involved in this conversation. And then I did see the draft and how the changes were made to my property. So moving forward, I don't believe I have any concerns. I just wanted to make sure that I understood it correctly. So it'll continue as light industrial, and there will be some commercial usage added onto it. Is that correct?
Yep, Mr. Mayor, if I may, through you. That is correct. It's this parcel is rather unique, given its context. It's adjacent to adjacent the railway, next to the dog park. It's south of a tier of residential lots, and historically it's been used for light industrial uses. And given its position, it's kind of tucked away off the main street, although it's in our Tecumseh Road Main Street improvement area. It doesn't quite fit neatly into a mixed use commercial designation. So our suggestion, and we've included this in the report, is to revise this, give this area a special policy that allows for a limited range of light industrial uses that are compatible with the surrounding area, but also allow for suitable commercial type uses to locate there as well.
Perfect. Okay. And then I just want to confirm that the existing uses, the tenants that I currently have, they're fine the way they are, correct?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, the existing tenants that you have would conform to the proposed policy in the draft official plan.
Perfect. Okay. No, that's great. I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Iwani. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thanks.
Okay, you too. Next up is Judy Robson, also a resident. Ms. Robson, there we go.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for giving us this time. I do want to start by commenting how we really appreciated the interaction at the open house. I think it was probably one of the best open houses that I've ever attended, because there was a lot of interaction and we felt satisfied that we were given the time to have a meaningful say. And I have submitted a large probably document, which I don't intend to read or recite here tonight. It would take much too long. So I'm hoping that that you have the opportunity to look it over. But I have 12 points that Brian has already heard before. You probably have heard before. I just simply want to kind of bring them up very quickly for the south end here in the Old Castle area, that there are some concerns that we want to show. Brian, I have 12 of them. I think it would take too long for you to comment on every one. You may have already commented it on the report, but if you feel like you want to comment, and then just simply jump in and say, I'd like to comment, because I know there's other people waiting, so I don't want to take up too much time. So the first point that I want to bring up, that the tone of the Tecumseh official plan reflect the OMB decision of 2018 by demonstrating a clear understanding by council and administration that the PPS denotes a precise and distinct distinction between the meaning of community and municipality when we're talking about planning and growth. And that in the OMB decision, they did not agree with Tecumseh's interpretation at that time that planning should be for, and this is hard to express, planning should be for the township as a whole, but rather when planning for the future growth and development of a primary settlement such as Oldcastle, the policies of supporting a livable and resilient community do apply. So I wanted to make sure that the official plan tone adheres to that. Second, that the Tecumseh official plan distinctly promotes and encourages residential development, particularly on the lands designated for hamlet development, and consider applying for an Oldcastle boundary extension on the north half of lot 302 for residential purposes in order to maintain a 10-year supply of residential housing or housing in Oldcastle itself, in preparation for the new hospital and for our next generation to live here in Oldcastle. In the past, sometimes that supply may have been more the lands used in the north end rather than the south end. And so it should be considered an entity on its own when you're thinking of the 10-year supply, the community itself. Thirdly, that the municipal owned lands, it's technically lot 303, situated between number 3 Highway North and McCord Drive, that right now are designated institutional, that were inherited from the Sandwich South Township as a result of amalgamation, be retained for future community use as a way of protecting and promoting a town focal point when you're planning Oldcastle, and create in the creation of a community hub for future long-term use as our residential component grows. I believe the official plan recommends it to be designated for commercial use and then sold. As the residential component of Oldcastle does increase, we're going to have a need for community facilities and those services, and they're going to rise. And it would be sensible from a business point of view to retain this property rather than purchase new in the long term. So we strongly hope, in fact, historically, that piece of property was kind of the core community center. It actually was the property where the St. Stephen's Anglican Church sat. Our town hall abutted that property. And then across the road, of course, was the McCarthy Hotel. So it isn't far-fetched that we old people can view that property for being a community hub in the long term. And therefore, we are requesting that it be saved or remain at least for institutional use. That in profiling in the OP, when you profile Oldcastle in the different sections for the OMP, it would give a more balanced description of our hamlet by including our community amenities, such as the Western and the Oldcastle Heritage Park, our churches, Emmanuel Baptist and Living Waters Assembly, the corner convenience stores and kilometers of multiple use paths, the Chrysler Greenway and Centennial Hub Trail. This would indicate the Oldcastle settlement as a balanced and desirable place for people and their families to live, encouraging new housing development in Oldcastle. It tends to focus mostly on our industrial component, almost swaying developers that that's the only thing that will develop in Oldcastle. Fifth point, that a new profile falling in line with the OMB 2018 decision be submitted in the form of amendment in the county official plan. You've mentioned that the county official plan is going to be coming up, I think, in the document. And as you know, the way Oldcastle is profiled in the OP, county OP, it does not coincide with the decision in 2018. Point 6, that the official plan notes the Oldcastle expansion of 57 hectares meets the employment needs of the municipality over the 25-year planning. I took that from the official plan. It should also note with the OMB finding, Oldcastle has already provided more than its share of employment lands. Therefore, the Tecumseh's plan should designate, possibly, if possible, more employment land use in the north settlement area of the municipality, rather than relying on Oldcastle as the main supplier of land for this purpose. We have looked at the Tecumseh Hamlet secondary plan, and we noticed again that is primary residential. I understand that sometimes it's just the nature of everything around it, but there is very little land designated for employment use.
Did we lose her?
She's froze right now.
Might be a connection issue here.
You're muted, Judy. We lost you a little bit. You lost connection, and then you're back, but you're muted. You're still muted.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll have to go back to about midpoint to point 6.
Oh, okay. Basically, we're just saying that if it's possible in the official plan, that as you're planning the growth, future growth and development of the north settlement area, that more consideration would be for employment lands in that area. And number 7 basically was to protect settlement within settlement areas, having maybe measures of stronger bylaws in the future from preventing the building of any type of facility that would work on the quality of life for the people living in that community, such as particularly greenhouses inside settlement boundaries. And number 8, that the now existing greenhouse facility for the growing of cannabis, like other non-conforming developments, be prohibited from any further expansion to their operation that exists today, as was initially presented to the council. And that the business of growing and cultivating of cannabis is regulated through bylaws and site-specific plans in agricultural zones outside of settlement boundaries. We're very worried that with our industrial component and then on these lands that are not yet protected by bylaw, but are called agricultural lands meant for urban development, that these lands could quickly be taken up with such facilities as this greenhouse before we have an opportunity to redesignate them for residential purposes. Plus that Oldcastle could find themselves in the same situation as Kingsville and the others if greenhouses are allowed in the industrial zone, as well as in this particular area as well. As you know, Oldcastle is the area of Oldcastle is smaller. It can't handle an influx all of a sudden if that were to happen of greenhouses, particularly for the purpose of cultivating cannabis. Number 9, the official plan be more precise to the Oldcastle Hammett Special Planning Study for the future development lands completion date. The study has been delayed for uncontrollable reasons, but since the resolution was made, an intensive employment agricultural use, as I've already mentioned, on these lands has been permitted. The use of these lands for employment purposes defeats the objective of creating a balanced Oldcastle with a larger residential component, and without supportive bylaws to the official plan, such developments could repeat itself using up the little available land that is in Oldcastle. Number 10, that the town's transportation master plan consider advocating for the highest possible safe pedestrian crossing on highway number 3 and the Oldcastle Road. Noting that the proposed crossing at the intersection of Highway 3 and Walker Road, which I have heard is the proposed site, is unsafe, considering the number of accidents, high fatality rates, and the large volume of vehicles that are at that intersection. We would like to see that the town view the crossing number 3 highway in Oldcastle, especially when that's where the residential growth will come out at, makes more sense than alleviating it through somehow to Walker Road and crossing there. Number 11, that the new comprehensive zoning bylaw be implemented within or before the 3 years to conform to this new official plan. We've experienced in our area that when the zoning bylaws did not conform to the official plan, we had some adverse, such as this greenhouse being built on lands meant for urban development. And the 12th summary, these are the points that the new Tecumseh official plan does not clearly and precisely distinguish when it is addressing policy for the municipality of Tecumseh as a whole, or addressing the community of Tecumseh, making it confusing for the reader. The PPS clearly makes a distinction between municipality and community. It is problematic for a municipality and a community with boundaries and separate identity to be referred to by identical names. The town of Tecumseh, a historical community, should retain its name, but the amalgamated, and I remind people that we were amalgamated, not annexed, name should be changed to the municipality of Tecumseh for clarity and accuracy. The number of times going through the document, it was confusing. I was not sure if we were talking about the settlement of Tecumseh or if we were talking about the municipality of Tecumseh. And the provincial policy really clearly states what a municipality is. I am going to, we don't have to, wait on this at this moment, because I will send to council and to you my viewpoint, my arguments as to how it would be even good business to consider doing the same thing that the municipality of Lakeshore did. And I know that people are concerned about doing this, that there's pros and cons to it. But I just wanted to at this time bring forth that when reading the document, the official plan, from a lay point of view, it's difficult to discern what we're talking about. So that is the summary. I have sent a larger document in before, and I'll turn everything over to council.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Robson. I know if you want to tackle this, Brian, or
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, it's not going to be much of a tackle. I think our report really summarizes and captures the essence of what Ms. Robson has just said.
Okay.
I think we provided comments. I think the one thing I want to really clarify, actually there's two things. One, there is no proposal to have cannabis growing inside industrial areas. I think we have indicated in our report that we are clarifying there could be processing, but there's not proposed to be growing in industrial areas. Number two, I think I just want to reiterate, and I've said it before at public meetings, I've had this discussion with people in the past, the future development lands in Oldcastle, there has been a very clear commitment made in the official plan that a study is required to ensure the proper designations are applied to these lands. And we have acknowledged that some of those lands will suitably be used for residential. I think what we need to be clear on is that there is no reasonable expectation that every single piece of what is identified as hamlet residential will become, or future development will become residential. Because I think the example tonight is the perfect example. Highway 3 is a significant transportation high-speed corridor. We would want to, through any analysis, ensure that if we're introducing residential to an area, you have to have regard to where people will go from those places and where they're going to be drawn to. So, I think we've always said, we are committed to doing a study. Yes, there have been delays for extenuating circumstances. There will be engagement through that process, but those are the types of issues that we have to be very careful about when we decide what uses are suitable at what locations to build, a functional, safe, and viable community. I do think, though, that all of the issues that were raised have been spoken to in our report, and I appreciate Judy bringing them up. We understand them completely. And I think we've taken an attempt to respond to them. I think we're actually closer than it may sound on some of these issues. And we are also looking to ensure, that as the town grows and the community changes, that it's done in a respectful and proper manner. And that it's mindful of the history that has happened. And it's going towards a future that, there's some consensus around. So With that, Mr. Mayor, I think, again, if there are any questions, we can speak to them, but I think the report, everything I've written down, I recall us responding to in our report in some.
Brian, could I just ask you, I haven't seen the report. Is the report online?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I haven't addressed it, so I'll be
Okay,
interested.
sorry. Yes, it is. Yeah, okay.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Robson. I don't know if there's any questions at this stage to our delegate. Okay, thank you very much. Now, our next delegation is Mr. Perry Burford.
Hi, Perry Burford. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I agree with everything that Aunt Judy just presented. Nice job, Jude. I want to specifically address the parcel of land at the corner of number 3 Highway and Walker Road, and also bounded up to the north by McCord Road. The OP proposes that this parcel of land be designated to be redesignated commercial and sold off. The food group, of which I am a member, objects to this. The food group represents the residents of the hamlet of Old Castle and the former township of Sandwich South. This land was bought, paid for, and owned by Sandwich South, so it cost the municipality of Tecumseh nothing. The residents strongly insist that this parcel of land be reserved for future community use, such as a future library, a community center, for social meetings, indoor exercise, workout facilities. After all, that piece of ground is in the hub of our community. Old Castle Sandwich South residents do not use the existing similar facilities in the Tecumseh Town Center for reasons of geography. It's just too far away. We need community facilities in our neighborhood where we live. We strongly object to this parcel of land being sold off. It's in the heart of our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Burford. All right, before I move on to community, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Conlon.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I did want to speak to that. We do. Thank you, Mr. Burford, for that. And that was raised through our PIC process. And I wanted to acknowledge that although the draft new official plan did propose to put the lands into a commercial designation, we recognize that that required some consideration of the council in particular, and that that we would need direction from council on a preferred path forward coming out of this evening, if possible. And you know, we recognize that if the long-term intent is that the lands, or at least for a period of time, that it be maintained until there's some resolution to this, that it could certainly revert to its the designation as a community facility, it's called, which isn't meant it's just for a community facility. It's synonymous with institutional type uses, a full range of institutional uses. And so we had put that, and that was something before the meeting was done tonight, as a question that we would like to discuss with council. And it may be that Mr. Anthony would want to speak to it as well, or perhaps, oh, sorry, I just saw Councillor Jobin. So yeah, that's a question that's out there for this evening.
Hey, thank you.
Very good. Hello?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, just responding to Brian. Yeah, okay. That makes sense, Brian. You know, we definitely would like that piece of ground reserved for community use. You know, it's just so obvious to us here at the south end. It would be an absolute shame to let it go, because we'd never get anything like it in the future. So thanks again. And council, good luck in your deliberations. Please do the right thing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Jobin and Councillor Tonio had questions.
Certainly. Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I do believe in the past we have discussed uses for that property. I think we looked into the costing of an outdoor ice rink, but again, with our mild climates, it just doesn't seem feasible. But I don't know if at this time we need a motion, but I would definitely agree with the residents that lot 303 maintains or remains as designated as an institutional designation. I don't know if we need a motion at this time or if we're just looking for discussion to have it applied to the approval of the OP.
I'd rather just wait till we finalize and deliberate on the plan. I think it's premature at this stage here.
Yep. Okay. I figured as such, but just felt like since we had some viewers and some members of the residents online here today, they should know that our position is interested in that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tonio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I agree with Councillor Jobin also and Mr. Buford. I think this land is could be important to the area one day, and I think by us selling it off would not be prudent at this time. Keep it for a while and see how this hamlet grows and how Tecumseh grows. So I think it's an important piece of land that we retain at this time. There's no dire need to sell it off. I haven't been apprised of any dire need that we need to sell it off. So I'd say let's keep it as such as we develop this hamlet area. Thank you.
Okay.
We're just talking about that issue right now, Mr. Mayor, correct?
Well, just, yeah, discussions, but
Yeah, I mean, I have other comments about the official plan, but I'll reserve that till later. Thanks.
Yep. Councillor Altenhoff.
Thank you, Worship. And again, just specific to this topic currently in discussion, I would tend to agree what's been brought forth by both councillors Tonio and Jobin. We have, and that's the whole idea of this official plan. Certainly, we're looking out far into the future, but we have to respect what we have in our past and everything that's brought us to the point that we are now. I'd like to know, maybe from administration, what is the incredible impetus, perhaps, to convert this designation? Perhaps I missed it or didn't catch it, but I mean, certainly some things of this type, obviously they're near and dear to our residents, and that's why we're here. So and I recognize it's a balancing act. Of course, we have to have, the industry as well, but something that's close and hits, really to heart. We really got to look at this closely, and I think certainly, look at what's the best interests for the residents in our area. So please, if administration can maybe provide comments on, what's that significant impetus to change this designation, I really appreciate hearing that. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll begin, and really for council's benefit, what drove it was certainly in my 20 years at the town, there have been multiple inquiries brought forward, and some of them have gone to the point of almost having reports to council, because of course, really we can't divulge of any lands without council declaring them surplus, and there has to be consensus around that and so on. And it was always recognized that the inquiries that were coming in, whether it be adjacent property owners who have commercial establishments and were looking to expand, or other investment persons in the area that were looking at the commercial developability of that site, because you can appreciate, although access is challenging, given the Highway 3 corridor through there, that it has some strong attributes. So really, it was driven by, this is any discussions that were had with parties that were interested in the lands were always around the concept of converting it into a commercial designation and zone. So at the time of the new official plan, with that in the background, we brought it forward, and council will recall when we did bring the official plan forward to council, we very specifically spoke to that issue as something we have put out there for discussion. And that it will ultimately need, some clear, consensus. as to what the preferred method of moving forward is. So that's really what drove it. No other initiative. There is significant history on this site that I'm aware of, and it's had different permutations in terms of thought of how it might be used over time by the former councils. But that was really how it landed today in the draft OP. It was just viewed as an opportunity to deal with the issue. And we are certainly completely open to a discussion to provide us with council's preference. As I said, and Mr. Anthony and Ms. Evans may want to speak to it further as well.
Yeah, and just not so we don't, I don't think that today in particular that we should get into the weeds on specific items within the plan itself. I think we, when the document does come to us more in depth and so forth, I think will be a proper time to bring that forward into discussions, because there's many items here. And, we've got 4 delegations that came today, and we got 25,000 people in the community. So I firmly believe that I just don't want to get into the weeds on specifics on items, but I think we need to take this document and every bits and pieces that have been added to it and brought forward by residents, I think would make a sound decision. Whatever we do now, I think is based on what is the best piece that or the best document that we can put forward as an official plan, because remember, this is for, the next 5 to 10 years and beyond. So whatever we're doing, and not to lose perspective in terms of, there's a lot of other areas and different pieces around the community that people would feel as strong as anybody else in terms of what should be designated and what shouldn't be. So all I'm saying is we're here to gather this information to complement the document, and then when I think in March or end of February or March, between now and then, I'm sure we're going to have a lot of discussions, and in particular with our midterm strategic plan coming forward. It's certainly I think a proper venue to put all that together. Councillor Houston, I believe Councillor Dowie also he might have had his hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I might be a little premature to jump the gun and say what we should or should not do with a specific piece of property. And as you mentioned, we've got the strategic plan coming up. We certainly know how the the food group and those on Oldcastle feel, but for me, in reading the agenda and a couple of the letters that came in, I honestly didn't contemplate having to come forward and say, here's what I think we should do or shouldn't do with that piece of property. So I feel for me I really don't know, because I don't think I have enough information quite yet to kind of give my feedback. So good that we're going to put it off, and I certainly need more detail of what we should do or shouldn't do with this one specifically.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Margaret, I think Ms. Evans first, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Dowie.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, back up your statement there that the key objective this evening at the statutory public meeting is for council to keep an open mind and listen to all public input that has been brought before it as a body, both verbally this evening by the delegations, as well as the fulsome report that planning staff have compiled, and that at this juncture, that really is the expectation of the legislative framework, is for council to take all of this in this evening. And to the mayor's point, and Councillor Houston, there will be an opportunity forthcoming for direction to be given. But this evening is for really the final culmination of all of the public input and ensuring that council understands the position of the delegates and the information that's been brought to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dowie.
Thank you, Worship. And just maybe a preface question. For the first couple of delegations, either I missed it or I actually have a couple of questions about the earlier presentations.
Yep.
Is there an opportunity for me to ask those questions?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Just going back to our first delegation, speaking to the opportunity to have 25-year land bank available or developable lands. So I know in recent years, our best opportunity for development has really been stalled. And that's the lands closest to Carron 22. And so what comes to mind is it prudent to include a buffer in terms of developable lands in the event that those kinds of circumstances happen again, or is it, we are well in excess of what we could possibly bring to a development ready position? So that was my first question, and I've got a couple, so I'm not sure if I should pause and let administration answer or just say them all.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, it would be easier if we could maybe do them one at a time, I think, if that's acceptable. And yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you, thank you for that question. And it's a very good question. So the lands that, your choice of words was interesting, saying that, should we have a buffer, so to speak, sort of this area, like a cushion, to ensure that we're not caught in a situation where we don't have sufficient lands. So the town has an abundance of land that is within settlement areas. Keep in mind that the area along the Banwell corridor in the northern settlement area will be designated through the completion of the study associated with those lands. So there will be the area that you were speaking to over on the Manning side of the northern settlement area. There will then be the lands along the Banwell corridor, we'll call it for simplicity's sake, combined with lands that are in the Old Castle area, either designated and available or subject to further study. And there's lands that are designated in the Maidstone area. Collectively, the town has in excess of 25 years supply, and we have not been hitting our growth targets that were projected previously. So we know that just looking at the analysis in our consumption rates, A, we have an abundance of land, but also B, I would argue that we will have greater opportunity for lands to develop that aren't exclusively contained within one geographic area, right? And that's sort of the playing field that we want to create, is that there's a multitude of different owners and investors who have the ability to develop. So from our perspective, there is sufficient land. That is all juxtaposed against the sort of, I guess, the bigger reality, which is settlement area expansions are very challenging and difficult to achieve, particularly when there is an abundance of land. So I think the town rests in that, what I would argue is a very comfortable position. The reality is just getting the fine tuning down for the lands we have inside settlement areas, making sure that they are closest to being developable as they can be for a development that comes forward and an investor that comes forward, that, the issues are fundamentally settled. So hopefully that helps answer your question. I think that the bottom line is, from our perspective administratively, we see our settlement areas as being sufficient and well beyond the town's needs, and combine that with intensification opportunities in particular. So.
Okay, thank you. And my second question speaks to that natural environment use of, or the use of the parkland designation for lands that would otherwise be sterilized for development. And I just wanted, I believe I understood what you were saying, and I just was hoping for a bit of clarity. And that's that you can use, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you can use natural environment lands as part of parkland, provided that they are not, they will and forever remain accessible to the public at large. So you can't just have an envelope of a forested area, for example, that has a lot of yards backing onto it, call that parkland, without it being part of a larger facility, or without it having that continued and permanent access by residents. Is that a fair perspective, or am I wrong in that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think maybe just a point of clarification, the sort of the tangent to the whole discussion was, does it qualify as parkland dedication under the Planning Act? And what we were trying to say was that, well, first of all, we should back up a little bit. There very few, if any, natural heritage lands that exist within our development areas. So if one were to go through Tecumseh to growth areas, and then we went to LaSalle, for example, just an easy example, there are natural heritage features everywhere, i.e. woodlots. So it's really a policy environment that's, it's an issue that we don't foresee being significant, first of all, if I could say that, only because most of our areas are just farmed lands as of right now that are identified for future growth. And what I was trying to communicate was the policies basically saying natural heritage features are important. They need to be protected, but they aren't exclusively for the domain of nature, that we can introduce public to them through recreational facilities. And really what that word probably needs to be honed down to organized trails of some sort, but that they are not intended to be parkland dedications, because what happens generally is that the natural heritage feature, which needs to be protected, becomes a parkland dedication that really isn't used as the park. It's part of a way to move around and in amongst natural heritage features. And that's really the common approach that has been used and is being recommended.
So just so for my own clarity, so really the land must be clear when it's a parkland dedication. It's free and clear or cash in lieu, but it can't be something that is undevelopable. It has to be really an equivalent amount of developable property. Is that right?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that is correct. And it would be lands that one would characteristically describe as parkland. Now, having said that, parkland is changing. You know, the types of features we have on parkland is changing as our demographics change and so on. But that would be the example, yes.
Okay, thank you. And my final question actually goes back to Ms. Robson's presentation. That's this distinction between community and municipality, and you know, and the use of language thereof. You know, I guess ever since the OMB decision, I will admit to being a bit perplexed in my own understanding of that distinction and the setting of what the boundaries are of a community versus like a municipality has political boundaries. You know, we know that Manning Road and Banwell Road, I mean, we know where those lines are on a map. But where I don't know, I can't really tell where a community begins and ends. Is that based on a zoning designation? Is that based on some sort of major barrier, like a major road or a creek? Or so I'm struggling with that one in terms of what makes something a community versus something that's more of a municipal interest.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely fascinating question. And you know, there is a lot that can be discussed on this issue. What I would say fundamentally is at the time that the board was having regard to this issue, it was under the jurisdiction of a separate official plan that was one of three in the municipality. And I think the board was somewhat confounded by that situation and challenged. The perspective that we have is that this is a new official plan intended to cover the town in totality, and that it integrates the town as a community. We've had discussions with the County of Essex. We've had discussions with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and we feel comfortable that the way that the plan is structured, it recognizes that fundamentally, we have areas where we are identifying for growth and prosperity, and we are identifying areas to protect for long-term agricultural use and natural heritage features. And that we really weren't drilling down into community, because one thing we've learned over time in planning and at the hearing is that I might live inside Oldcastle. I might even live outside Oldcastle Hamlet, 2 kilometers away on a farm, but I view myself as part of the Oldcastle community, for example. Or I might say that about Maidstone Hamlet, or another geographic feature that I attribute as my community. And it could be my neighborhood, could be my school, my library. The plan is really very much centered around the concept of the town of Tecumseh as was created after amalgamation. All of our thinking turns around that concept, whether it be for planning, infrastructure investment, long-term financial investment, and so on. So the plan is structured to reflect Tecumseh as a community. There may be those that don't agree with the concept. I think the plan very much identifies specific elements of each settlement area that might be unique, but it's trying to reconcile this concept that under a vision of one single plan versus 3 official plans, there is a town of Tecumseh. And the planning is directing how and foreseeing and having a vision on how that plays out over time. So I would acknowledge the OMB had a decision. It said certain things. We are mindful of it. I think it was under a very specific situation and probably open to considerable interpretation. We've done our best to balance that against the PPS, against the realities of where the town is today. So we view it as the town of Tecumseh in its totality.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Bichetti.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank the delegates this evening. Tonight's meeting, the purpose when I come in to sit in this session here was to listen and to take notes and ask questions for clarification. And I must tell you, Judy and others, you guys did a fabulous job with being very clear and succinct with your points. And again, moving forward, I look forward to providing my comments at the final report when that comes before us. But again, I just want to acknowledge how well these points and the engagement with our administration has been, and I hope it continues. And again, we'll work out through those little things that we need to work out. And I know there's a few points raised tonight, but I'm looking forward to that final report and providing comment. Thank you.
Okay. Move on to, there's 2 items of communications. If I have a motion to receive. Councilor Alton.
Yeah, I'm willing to receive that, but also I have a couple comments, Your Worship, when you're ready to receive them.
Sure.
Thank you very much. So would you like my comments now or following?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll hold off on.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll still deal with that motion then, but, and I appreciate, and through Your Worship, I would like to echo the thanks that the Deputy Mayor gave, to all our residents providing input, as well as, congratulate administration on formulating a document like this. I mean, I see this as, in my role as a prof, kind of as an incredible thesis, and a lot of work goes into this. So I appreciate it. I'm not the expert in planning, but nonetheless, I see this as a very incredible and important roadmap for us as we move forward. So it's very important, and I really want to extend my thanks to administration as well as our residents for providing the input. With regards to this comment that was been raised about community versus municipalities, I would just suggest on a very kind of overarching type thought, this document, I think we want it to bring us all together. We want it to make it, a kind of a unified entity, I'll call us. And I would just kind of encourage, like our bodies, we are one whole body and we perform a function and have an incredible operation. The reality is we do have unique attributes. And if we can try our best in the wording of this OP to allow for that, the flexibility of the unique attributes, yet the overall arching concept of a unified entity, I think that for our future would be, what we all want. The other point, and I know it was raised by a number of the residents providing input, was they commented on diversity and inclusivity. And, I've certainly seen in my roles, as prof, working with the National Granting Agency, NSERC, at the university, I've seen this concept, they abbreviate EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusivity. I would say in the past 5 years, it's become a very significant, and an important entity, really, that helps shape our vision as we move forward. I was just recently looking at the Engineers Canada website, and they were commenting on really how important this this concept of EDI is for future planning. And really that's what this is. I recognize this is not an engineering document, but I think if we can try to, and I know it was articulated in the report, and I appreciate it that administration will address this. But unfortunately in the document, there's no comment on equity. And I think if we can try to hit that point, as well as, the diversity inclusivity is there, but again, have an overall arching kind of concept of that. We know our federal, our provincial governments, they are looking at EDI very, very carefully, and it's integrated in almost everything that we have to bring forth to them. So I would just encourage, if we could integrate that into this document, I think that would be a good contribution. Other than that, I really do want to extend my thanks and acknowledgement for all the hard work and the input as well from everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilor Alton. And then if there's no further comment, okay, Councilor Tonio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one comment concerning the future of our parks. I had a conversation with Paul Anthony concerning this, but as we grow and make new facilities or improve our facilities at our parks, I would like to see more naturalistic settings and more sitting areas with rocks and large trees or logs, berms, all that kind of stuff that doesn't take much maintenance. We won't have to replace it in 10, 15 years like a jungle gym or, these centers that we have here made, well, it used to be pressure treated. Now we can't use that anymore. So now we have another thing. But anyway, I just think we should start developing sections of our parks that have naturalistic areas, and we can use them, read whatever we want to do, but it's more of a naturalistic area. So I just want to make that comment as we move forward and we start looking at energy saving costs using sustainable energy as we move forward. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead, Mr. Hillman.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just very briefly, thank you for those comments. And I would just remind council, fair comment about the naturalistic. This document very much links to the Parks and Rec Master Plan. And I think Mr. Anthony has something under review in that regard. And so this plan sort of creates that umbrella, and that type of detail would be completely ideal, and I think found with some considerable positive response. And those are great concepts to start looking at in terms of how to, respond to the changing needs of the municipality and the community. That we, you remain engaged on those issues. And while I'm speaking, because we may be coming to the end, I just wanted to thank council, and there were some very positive comments that we very much appreciate. And I wanted to acknowledge, this is a significant undertaking, especially to do it in-house, and that we have a very strong team that tries to work cohesively on this. So there's the planning side, myself, Chad, and Enrico, but we have a wonderful engineering, Parks and Rec, finance division that is responsible for creating, that ability to discuss these issues and arrive at, I hope, sound recommendations to council, along with, the leadership of Mark. So I just thank you for the comments that were made this evening, and we look forward to, having a chance to coalesce all of this and bring something back and to council and start to move forward. So thank you.
Yeah, just on that too, and I know Chad maybe in getting weigh in a little bit too, because as our representative, especially on the regional energy plan and so forth. So there's no doubt, and that's something I think that was alluded really early on when on the onset of this, is they developed a plan with a lens on the environment, because obviously we're into the climate change, and then and it's on everybody's mind. We know that because of the issues that are confronting our region, our province, our country, the world. And so I just want to thank Mr. Jeffries too, with his work that he's been doing with our local high schools and the environmental committees within those groups, and his involvement too as a representative on the regional energy plan. And so we're very fortunate to have high caliber, and I'm going to say in terms of planners. We've got two that are officially planners here, and we've got a CAO who's got 30 years better, in the planning institution as well. So we're very blessed, and that we've got a very strong team, and then supporting with I think a very good engineering group with Phil and John and in our parks department. So I think we're very fortunate. We've got a great resource just within our house, without going beyond that and so forth. So I have full confidence that what's going to be brought forward in the end of February, March is going to be a solid document that we're going to be able to adopt and adapt and create great community within our region. So just want to echo some of the comments that certainly members of council have made, Councilor Tonio and so forth, on behalf of us to the group. But if Mr. Jeffries, I'll give you that because I did pull your name out, and then I'll move on to Councilor Dowie after.
Yes, since you opened the door, Mr. Mayor, I just very briefly, partly because of our involvement in that committee, the climate change and energy policies in this official plan are some of the most comprehensive across the province. We've spent some considerable time talking about it with the climate change specialist at IRCA and the county planner, who's also an integral part of that committee. So you'll find that those policies are included in that section on climate change and energy conservation. And then with respect to the EDI policies that Councilor Eltonhoff was mentioning earlier, those concepts are becoming more and more prevalent in the field of planning as well. And we had some great conversations during the PICs with people who are pushing for those kinds of policies to be more explicitly contained in the document. And although that they're implied through many different policies, such as affordable housing and others in the document, we realize that they need to be enhanced, and we are making a commitment to do that. So you'll find that the final draft will include more policies that speak directly to that concept.
I believe Councilor Dowie, you had a comment.
Thank you, Worship. You know what? I have a couple comments related to the or questions that came from the written submissions. So I'm hoping administration could maybe respond. The one from the Masonry Association, I thought that was quite an interesting package that they put forward, and I've had the opportunity to go to a lot of the municipalities that they had cited, and for example, you'll go into I think in Guelph's probably the best example I can think of, where the Tim Hortons is based on a common facade, and you'll see that in St. Jacobs and other places, and it seems like that's what they're getting at in terms of wanting our official plan to recognize very specific fixture or finishings in terms of the built environment. And I see where there aren't any recommendations being made. And I was hoping that you might be able to elaborate as to why we don't want to be restrictive and try to, kind of get to that next level that other municipalities have sought.
Go ahead, Mr. Jeffrey.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. To Councilor Dowie, we have urban design principles. There's a section on that in the official plan that establishes the framework for urban design guidelines to be developed. And before we specify building materials or architectural styles that we'd like to see throughout the municipality, we need to take a couple of other steps to implement the official plan first. And one is creating architectural guidelines, and the policies speak to that. So we are recommending in our report that we enhance the site plan policies so that once we establish architectural guidelines in specific areas, that we can use site plan control to help to influence the design in those areas. So we agreed with them on that note, but we didn't want to say that we gave preference to one material over another at this point, because we have to establish the guidelines first.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that clarity, and so there is still opportunity if we wish to have a district that has that kind of feel. The other is with respect to going above and beyond the Municipal Act. So this was a general theme that was brought up in terms of, and it applies to a lot of things, notification, densities or restrictions of therein, agricultural crops. I guess this is maybe just an more open-ended question. Is the official plan the suitable place to define going above and beyond what provincial legislation calls for, given that provincial legislation could change at any time as well? That's my feeling of why we wouldn't do that, but I was hoping you might be able to elaborate as to whether this is the tool, if we want to do better than the province, or if there are other tools in the toolbox.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll start. I'm sorry to do this, but would you have an example? Because really, and before you answer that, we do very heavily rely on the legislative framework that's designed by the province, and there's a fine line beyond which you're exceeding, but you're actually creating burdens in some cases. So we live in an area, of course, where from a development perspective, they are cross-jurisdictional and they go in between each location, and there's some commonality on how we function, and the public gets to be aware of those as well. So was there a particular example, maybe Councillor Dowie, that that's driving your question?
Well, you know what, notification is one. Typically when we have a land development application, they can be very controversial, and there's a feeling that even though we do what's in accordance with the act, that we ought to do better. And I guess there's question as to whether how better is better to satisfy all needs. So that's one example. The other is it was raised the disposal of land, whether that is something that ought to be a simple decision of town council, or whether that ought to be something that's a lot more public of a process, in spite of the Municipal Act identifying that this would be something that could be considered in camera. But anyway, just those are the ones that really came to mind.
Okay.
For discussion, plus the cannabis issue, which was mentioned in a number of the submissions, as to even though it's a legal crop and is something that federal legislation has permanently changed for Canada, that we ought to be, there's certainly there've been a couple of asks for us to really go back in time in terms of the legislative control, or use municipal controls as much as possible to not allow that sort of activity in the municipality.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So very briefly on the issue of the cannabis, we have tried to introduce a policy framework that we think is respectful of the fact that it is a legal crop, but it does have certain nuisances associated with it. So it's reasonable, I think, for the municipality to introduce a sort of a regulatory environment around that. On the issue of the sale of land, really not from my perspective a common, the OP is not a common venue within which to put disposition of land policy. And I would argue that it probably does start as a council policy reflected through a bylaw of some sort. So I think that would be just an area that's not common to the Planning Act and not common to be spoken to. Now, you would have noticed near the end of the official plan, it does speak to there are these other legislative elements out there that help to implement an official plan. But it wouldn't speak to a specific policy around, how to go through a disposition process and what policies might guide you. And then on the last one on notification, it has been the practice of the municipality to follow the Planning Act as it relates to notifications. But what I would say is where we have moved a little bit is towards a broader use of the different platforms that are available to the municipality. We certainly could add some language to promote those types of opportunities, whether it be social media. Chad had made reference to PlaySpeak, which is something we'd really like to drill into a lot more and so on. But we, it is available that we could speak to other requirements, but it has to be very clearly enunciated in the plan. What are the requirements that are to be are utilized if they're over and above and if you create sort of a new requirement outside of and greater than the Planning Act. I believe there's a section in the Act that allows us to do some work around that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you've answered mainly all of them. And I'm thinking of one case that I've seen in the past in another municipality. That's with respect to the wetland designations. And this whole matter went through the official plan process, but the landowner whose lands are being sterilized never received formal notification that their lands are being sterilized as a result of the official plan. And so that's certainly the kind of situation I'd like to, I wouldn't want to put our residents in, that we have that sort of mechanism, even though, it may have passed the test legally. Is it morally the right thing to do to know you're having that kind of impact and not letting the resident know?
Fair. Mr. Mayor, if I could just very quickly. Yes, and I think that example is a very interesting one. And we've been reading a bit about that lately. What has happened in the recent past is that the ministry will, it's outside, first of all, of the domain of the municipality. But the ministry and its staff will go out and they will identify lands that suddenly meet the criteria and no one knows. And then they will establish that, okay, this is now provincially significant. And where the process starts to get a little bit of a bump in the road is that then when the municipality comes forward to update its official plan, we are provided mapping from the province that says these lands are identified, because they went through a process that really doesn't involve the municipality. So I'm not convinced, because it's a function of how they operationalize that. I'm not sure if there's a way we could develop a policy to necessarily correct their method of identifying wetlands. That has become an issue. And I know that, as I recollect, you've made a reference to, there have been a number of resolutions from municipalities throughout Ontario speaking to the frustration around this methodology that's used. But I'm not certain that the OP would be able to grapple with that necessarily, only because it's a function of how the ministries themselves are operating and functioning.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and okay, I know we need to move on, but just the one point that I want to make too, in terms of what Councillor Dowie was alluding to, in terms of do we exceed municipal affairs, or we, in different plans and so forth, and what we try to match up what we think is the right plan. A good one that I find is on intensification, and how difficult that is, where I believe we've done a above and beyond job in infilling, and if you were to look at how many units that we've put in place in the last 2.5 years, and what's on the in the pipeline for the next little while, it is very significant compared to any other municipality in the region. I would think we'd be leading in that regard. But the difficulty too is when you're trying to build on those provincial principles, and you've got that embodied in the plan. It's trying to convince the general public that it's the right thing to do. And as you know, at the roadblocks that our official plans meet on an ongoing basis is it doesn't fit my my neighborhood. It's the not in my backyard certainly approach and so forth. So that to me is how do we better explain that it's the right thing to do, which we try to do, but in the same token, this is what the province is telling us. Instead of going out and chewing up more farmland or sprawling your community, in different pieces where I will do a piece here, a piece there, and I'm not throwing stones at any municipality, but I think that's a critical piece where you want to infill and certainly so forth. But I think what we've done, even without the new plan, is we've exceeded what the province is really asking us to do. All right. motion on communications.
So Gary?
Yep.
Gary, I just had a quick question for Brian.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were moving.
Yeah, no, I will move it. Just a question for Brian regarding the Canada-wide active transportation. I know Gary and I at the county level, we received a report recently, and Brian, you're a rep for our town. Is there any language in the official plan that could help facilitate? I know at the county level, they're very sticklers with how we write things and whether a road is arterial or collector. I really like the paved shoulder. If you look at the county map, how they showed us what they've done in the southern shore, County Road 2050 along Lake Kingsville and Leamington. It would really be nice if the CWATs could continue all the way around. We've got the county, Windsor, Essex County, a lot of frontage of lake. And if it could go and come around Amherstburg, LaSalle, Windsor, through Tecumseh, tie into Lakeshore, things like paved shoulders, there's opportunities there. So again, just a question, if there's any opportunity to put something in there that, when we need to go there, because the CWATS committee, things change in 4 or 5 years, and if there's opportunities, I would like the official plan to have some strong language that would help our situation there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Really, CWATS is driven mostly by the document that is adopted by County Council, which is the CWATS plan. It is up for review right now. The official plan recognizes that as a major policy document and tries to help implement it. And it tries to do it in a way that integrates the plans of the CWATS in with the local plans for mobility choices, and to kind of unify it all. On the issue of paved shoulders versus other facility types, whether it's a dedicated trail or bike lanes, really the driver of what facility is appropriate is a function of the context within which you're designing the infrastructure, and it's in the realm of recognizing who are your users and who are you trying to safely use the infrastructure. So the official plan very much speaks to a diversity of transportation facilities, a safe transportation facilities. So paved shoulders work in one context and maybe not in another, and vice versa. So the OP isn't intended to get quite that specific, but it is trying to identify and protect corridors. That's really the goal of the OP ultimately, and then allows us to implement those as either we're doing capital investments and you're resolving what is the preferred facility, or a developer comes in and it's like, oh, we need this type of facility going through this land. So there is a very strong link between the official plan and CWATS, but CWATS would kind of drill into the types of facilities more than an official plan would. Be mindful too, if I could, Mr. Mayor, through to the Deputy Mayor, that the town's transportation, active transportation plan component of the Transportation Master Plan is a driver here as well. So those are all the tools available.
Okay, thank you, Brian. All right, we need to move on. Communications, we've got 2 items here. A motion to receive Councillor Toniol and Councillor Houston. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. We do have the report that's before us as well. If we could have that the report from the Planning and Building Services 2020-101, the town Tecumseh draft new official plan, September 2020 results of public information centers be received, and that the next steps in the new official plan process as outlined under the report be authorized. Deputy Mayor Bichetti, Councillor Jobin, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. No further business on this public forum. I certainly want to take this opportunity to thank everyone, and in particular our senior management team led by Mr. Hillman and Mr. Jeffries. Thank you for this comprehensive report, and adjournment's in order. Councillor Altenhoff, Councillor Tonio, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. I do believe we've got about 11 minutes or so. And I believe we have to sign off and then come back.